Symbolism and The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by Shelley Marilyn Strode. We've all heard the tale of The Wizard of Oz. The movie by MGM turned 70 years old this year and still enchants people of all ages, just as it did back in 1939. Before it was a movie, it was a book. Going to look at the story, the original story, and what we can learn about the time period that it was written in. There's a popular debate where some believe that there is symbolism regarding populism and other economic and political climates, while others believe there's nothing more than entertainment to the story. Lyman Frank Baum wrote The Wonderful Wizard of Oz back in 1900. Even though the story is 109 years old, it's found many ways to reinvent itself to stay relevant and entertaining. In 1939 was the year of Judy Garland and the famous movie. But modern author Gregory Maguire also has a take on certain characters in a book called Wicked. Back in 1900, there was much debate about business, politics, economics, and other social issues at the time. There were questions about the roles of government, industry, and the common man and how they all fit together. L. Frank Baum and W.W. Denslow wrote and illustrated this modern fairy tale in a time of flux and turmoil. There was great debate about currency, but more about that later. It may seem strange, the idea of a children's story that could have much more of sophisticated a meaning, but it is nothing new. Hansel and Gretel has often been referenced as an illustration of the poverty and starvation faced by many medieval German families. Ring Around the Rosie is now accepted to be about the bubonic plague that devastated Europe. It does not seem to be a far stretch to think that the children's story from the 20th century could be a means to illustrate the issues facing the country at the time. There were magazines that were devoted to entertainment while engaging in political satire. These political cartoons show many of the common metaphors that were used at the time, and even brought to light movements such as the populist movement. Some historians, such as Henry Littlefield and Fred Earsman, believe that there is a lot of symbolism in the iconic characters and objects in the story. These can be broken down into three groups. First is the economic symbolism, then political, and finally social symbolism. Much of the analysis of the symbols revolve around finding the common political cartoons of the day and seeing the characters or other icons that are in the book and equating them together. First, we will take a look at four symbols that are often thought of as economic symbols. The first being one of the most well-known, the ruby slippers. In the iconic movie, the slippers that Dorothy receives after killing the Wicked Witch of the East and that ultimately bring her home, the shoes are red. The change was made because the studio wanted to show off the vibrancy of the new Technicolor technology. In the book, however, the shoes are silver. Silver was a very important object back in the turn of the century. There was a big debate about the virtues of backing U.S. currency with gold and silver. The second symbol is another icon from both the book and the movie, the yellow brick road. A common interpretation is that the yellow brick road is meant to represent the gold standard. The U.S. currency was backed by gold at the time. Dorothy is taking the silver shoes down the yellow brick road, and that's a representation of the populist idea that using silver in a similar way as the gold standard, so that farmers could pay down their debts. In our third economic symbol is the name of the land, Oz. Oz is short for ounce, and a bimetallist movement pushed for 16 to 1 ounce conversion of silver to gold. The last economic symbol is the state of Kansas as a contrasting location. Kansas was, and still is, often seen as a place of sacrifice and hard work for little reward. This is a contrast to the bright and shiny land of Oz. Some of the symbolism in Wizard of Oz can also be seen as political. Many of the symbols were commonly used in political cartoons of the day. We will look at four symbols as they are seen politically and why they can be seen as such. The first symbol in the beginning of the book is the cyclone, or the tornado, which rips through the gray and lifeless Kansas landscape and transports our heroine to the shiny land of Oz. Tornadoes and cyclones were often used in political cartoons to represent political change. Because Kansas's violent political history and the fact that it is well known for being part of what is now referred to as Tornado Alley, it is not a far-fetched idea that Kansas was chosen as the setting for this reason also. Another political symbol that may be surprising is the flying monkey. While the flying monkeys have not necessarily been in political cartoons themselves at the time, it's been suggested that they represent Pinkerton agents that were hired by railroad barons to deal with labor unions. The Wicked Witch of the West sends the flying monkeys out to intimidate our helpless travelers. It is similar to the Pinkerton agents being sent out to intimidate individuals who try to unionize and the labor unions that would recruit workers. Thirdly, the Cowardly Lion can be seen as the representation for populist candidate William Jennings Bryan. Bryan seemed to have much political bluster and could talk a big game, but he would end up shying away when the populace needed him the most. The lion is seen as a political symbol from the time period, sometimes a favorable symbol, and sometimes not. Lastly, the wizards and witches are political symbols also. The wizard is seen as a fraud, someone who uses a lot of flash but cannot do what is promised. There is also the Good Witch of the North, but no mention of the South, although it is popularly accepted that the Emerald City is located in the South. It is possible that this symbol is symbolism of continuing hard feelings in a post-Civil War America. Lastly, we will look at social symbolism. Many of the symbols can also be classified under economic or political symbols. The reason they're classified under social is because they are about different members of society and what role they were to play. First is the Tin Man. There's a symbol that has been used in advertisements and cartoons. It is seen as a whimsical character. The Tin Man can be referenced as a symbol of the industrialization of northern states and how the workers could be treated so poorly that they lost heart in the system. By unionizing these workers, they would be much happier in their work and could be seen as being human again. A second social symbol is that of the scarecrow and the farmer. The scarecrow is well known for its use in the fields to keep pests away, but in the story the scarecrow is looking for a brain. There had been many calls with the rural man to raise less corn and more hay, and demand fair treatment like their industrialized brothers. Lastly, the Munchkins themselves can be seen as an allegory for the common man. When Dorothy's house fell out of the sky and fell on top of the Wicked Witch of the East, it could be used as its own symbol for trust in industry based out of the American East, because at the turn of events, the Munchkins became free people. There has been debate if the story was intended to be such a glimpse into the issues that faced the common man during the 20th century. Blom never comes out and says that it is, or if it's a simple children's story that is nothing more than his imagination. Given the fact that the stories like this will tend to reflect the time period they were created in, vernacular and morals are always found in these when it is unintended. Littlefield does not seem completely convinced in the argument that the symbolism was intentional. But why is this important? By analyzing this particular piece of literature, it gives us insight into the 20th century and the values that dominated them. Symbols can be found and analyzed in any work of art, and this book is no exception. The question is, were they intentional?